Hi guys, it is April from Getting Hygge with It. Today I'm here to revisit my December book haul from last year. So this is a new-ish thing that I'm doing on my channel. I almost feel like I should stop introducing this because I've done it a few times, but essentially I go back a year ago, this month a year ago, so December of 2017, and I look at all of the books that I bought and I assess, like, how did I do? Have I read any of them? Have I donated some of them? How many do I still have to read? And then I choose one and I put it on this month's TBR. I'm really enjoying doing these videos. I should mention that this whole video concept was totally inspired by Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand. She started doing this exact kind of video and I was just, it was just such a smart idea. It's such a great way to assess your spending habits and book buying habits. So I love it. So thank you so much, Sarah, for coming up with this concept. It is helping me so much to take stock and really get to know my bookshelves again. So keep on watching to find out what I bought last year and what I'm putting on my TBR. So in December of 2017, I hauled 18 books. Now this is much better than it has been in the past. As you know, I have spent so much money on books in the past and I've bought so many books. Like one of my earlier hauls was like I think it was 60 books or something crazy. So 18 is fantastic. Of those 18, I've read 3. I've donated 5, and so I now have 10 on my TBR still. So let's go through one by one. I did a historical fiction book haul in December of last year, and on that haul, I picked up The Sixth Lamentation. In this book, we're following a priest in 1995 in England. And he's approached by a man who is in a lot of distress. He's asking what to do when the world has turned against him. And the father says to him, you should seek and claim sanctuary. And that's exactly what the man does. And then the priest finds out that this is a suspected Nazi war criminal. So you're following that storyline, and then you're also following a woman who is opening up to her granddaughter Lucy because 50 years earlier, this woman named Agnes, she lived in Paris when it was occupied by the Nazis, and she risked her life. She risked her life to smuggle Jewish children to safety, and then sadly, her efforts were found out by an SS officer, and it's the same man who's now claiming sanctuary. Sounds absolutely fascinating and super interesting. So that is the first book that I picked up in my historical fiction haul. I also picked up The Help, which is so wonderful. I really loved it. I've already read it. And it takes place in the South. And we're following a young girl named Scout. She's a white girl, and she has ambitions to kind of get out of her town, which is very backwards. It's very racist in its thinking, and she just doesn't think that way. And she decides, as a writer, to interview the maids, the black maids, that have taken care of her in her life and that are friends with one another, and try to get to know their lives. And I really enjoyed it. I know that a lot of people have found it to be problematic, and I'd almost like to reread it to look for that, because I read it a long time ago now, like when it first came out. I also picked up The Hours, which I believe won the Pulitzer Prize. Yes, it did. This was also turned into a movie, which I've seen a long time ago, and it's kind of a retelling of Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, which I believe I read. I must have read that. I'm I'm like 99% sure that I read that at Queen's in my English literature degree. Like, that would have been read. I am not an like enormous Virginia Woolf fan, or at least I wasn't in university. That said, this storyline, it sounds really fascinating to me. We follow 3 women at 3 different time periods. One of the women is hosting a party in honor of a friend of hers. Then we follow a woman in the 1950s. She's a suburban housewife. And then we also follow Virginia Woolf. And she is beginning to write Mrs. Dalloway. And I have always wanted to read it. So I picked that up. I picked up Daughter of Fortune by Isabel Allende. This follows a girl who marries, I think, an older man who she is not in love with. And then this man's nephew shows up in her life. And when her husband dies, she totally falls in love with the nephew. I think they move away to Paris or something like that. So I do like Isabel Allende's work. I really enjoy her writing. I'm not sure if I feel like reading her right now. I also picked up Lady of the Rivers. Oh, there's several Philippa Gregory's here. So we've got Lady of the Rivers. We've got the Red Queen, the White Queen, and also the White Princess. I have donated each and every one of those because I do not get on with Philippa Gregory's writing. I don't like it. I may at one point try Alison Weir because I've heard that she writes the same subject matter but better, and I think that might be a good idea. So I also did a little horror and thriller haul last year. I picked up My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier, which I read and loved. So good. That's totally about 2 cousins. One of the cousins is a bit older and takes his little cousin under his wing when that man's family dies. And so they kind of grow up like father and son, but not, the age gap isn't that far apart. Anyway, the older cousin one day goes on a trip to Italy, I believe, and he meets a woman there. And he's been like a bachelor all of his life. He meets a woman, he falls in love, he marries her. Her name is Rachel, and then he dies very suddenly. And his cousin back home is going, what? Like, this makes no sense. He was in perfect health. Rachel comes to visit in England, and you find out who she is. I really enjoyed it. I also picked up Suffer the Children. It's kind of post-apocalyptic horror where all sorts of kids just suddenly up and die. Everyone's totally devastated. All of the parents are devastated. And then the children slowly start to come back to life, and they're all excited. Their kids are back, but then they start eating people. So it's like zombie. It sounds like a lot of fun. Might be a hard one if you are a parent, but I think that sounds like fun. I also picked up A Murder at Rosamund's Gate, which sounds more like a cozy mystery. It's set in the Victorian period, and we follow a group of housemaids who take care of a home, and then there is a murder at that home, and it's about their response to that and who is the killer, and it just sounds like a super cozy mystery. I also picked up I Am Pilgrim, which sounds really heavy. It's a thriller, kind of a political thriller about all of these terrorist attacks going on around the world, and our main character is trying to get to the bottom of what is going on. I also bought The Haunting of Maddie Clare, which is about a ghost in a barn, and it follows a man who goes to kind of exorcise the ghost, and we follow, our main character is a woman who goes to attend and help out with this exorcism. And Maddie Clare is a very angry ghosts. She particularly doesn't like men, and we find out why in that book. So it sounds like a lot of fun. The Couple Next Door by Shari Lapena, I think. I still haven't read that. Oh dear. I think this one is about a group of couples that are friends, and one night one of them goes to the other couple's house. They have their baby at home, but they've got the monitor, everything should be fine, and then the baby goes missing. I don't know, I've heard mixed stuff about that and about Shari Lapena as a whole. The Boy in the Suitcase I donated because I just wasn't interested in it. Gone Baby Gone is part of a series by Dennis Lehane. I still have it, but it's part of the series. I'd like to collect more of the series before I dive in. I like to start at the beginning of a detective series. But Dennis Lehane is a great writer, so I should really start looking for his series more. Oh, The Little Stranger I picked up last year at this time. I read this and absolutely adored it. It's one of my favorite horror books now. It's my favorite ghost story now. It's so creepy. It's so perfect if you like historical fiction and you like horror. You've got to read The Little Stranger. It's unsettling. It is so much more than a ghost story. You're really looking at the demise of the upper class in England, you know, around the wars, and I just absolutely adored it. And then you get so involved in the characters and that plot of you know, these people who were so rich and now we're living in this like dilapidated house, and how they interact with one another, that you totally forget that it's a ghost story, and then suddenly boom, something so scary happens. I loved that book. And then the last book that I bought in December of 2017 was Blindness, which is another kind of apocalyptic story where everyone goes blind. It's like this epidemic where everyone goes blind, and they are trying to sort out how to survive when no one is used to being blind. It does sound really interesting. So, what am I going to read? Honestly, it's kind of between two books. Both of them sound great. The Sixth Lamentation, that book about the priest and the Nazi war criminal who is asking for sanctuary. It sounds really, really neat. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about this one, but the other one is The Hours by Michael Cunningham. And you know what? I think I'm going to go with this one. It won the Pulitzer Prize. I feel like I should have read this by now, and I'm just kind of in the mood for a really feminist book. I really am. And so I'm hoping that that's what this is. Fingers crossed. But it sounds really, really great. And yeah, it's also pretty tiny. Like, this is like just over 200 pages. So I should easily be able to sneak this into December. So I'm choosing The Hours. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this video. And like, did you want me to pick another book? Was there another book that you were like, please, April, for the love of God, read that because it's amazing? Or were you thinking all the while, I hope she picks The Hours? Let me know. I would love to know, and I will talk with you next time. Okay? Bye, guys.